I'm going to start this evening by committing one of the cardinal sins of public speaking. I am immediately going to ask y'all to challenge me in your minds as far as my credibility to speak to y'all tonight. I am immediately going to ask y'all to question my character. All right? Now, I don't do this just because I think I'm so flawless that as I ask y'all to do that, I'm just going to fly by all y'all scrutiny. I don't do this because I think I'm so good that, I don't care about asking you these things because I feel so secure in my own righteousness. In fact, I think it's even riskier because of my youth and because some of y'all know me from even more of my youth. So when I ask y'all this question, I don't ask it because of my own confidence. I ask it because I want us to question a very basic word that we oftentimes use without considering the gravity, the implications, and its true meaning. So I want to ask y'all tonight, do you think that I am a good person? Do you think that I am good? If I were to die this evening unexpectedly and my funeral to be held on Saturday, would the person who gave my eulogy be able to get up and, with full confidence, with full belief in what he was saying, could he get up and could he say, Eric Tipton was a good man? If so, why? And if that man who would give my eulogy and get up and say he was a good man, but perhaps he didn't really mean it, perhaps he didn't feel it in his heart, perhaps he didn't truly believe that I was a good man, why is it that he wouldn't believe that? All right? And also with you in your minds. I'm glad nobody shouted out any answers, but in your minds, if you thought, yeah, he's a good guy, or if you thought, no, he isn't a good guy, what was the criteria? Why did you think I was a good person, or why did you not think I was a good person? What qualified me for the title of good guy, or what disqualified me for that title in your minds? Is it perhaps if I did make the cut and I was a good man in your minds? Was it because at some point in my life I've done something good that you observed? Was it perhaps one thing that I did that one time we had a conversation and I complimented your shirt? And from then on out you said, well, Eric Tipton is a good guy. He complimented my shirt. He did one good thing that I enjoyed. Is that what made me a good man in your mind? Now I think we can pretty quickly rule that out as a criteria for what makes somebody good, right? Because you can imagine the worst possible person, and they've probably done at least one quote-unquote good thing in their lives, even the worst of people, right? They may have accidentally held the door open for somebody without realizing they were doing it. Everybody has done probably one good thing in their entire life, no matter how despicable a life they have led. So if it's not me having done one good thing in your life, some of the people who know me better, some of the people who've seen more of my life, if I made the cut of being a good person, is it because I've done a lot of good things in my life? Or if I did not make the cut of being a good person, is it because you've observed me for a very long time and you've looked at my life and you said he hasn't done that many good things in his life? Again, we can use that criteria and think about it a little bit. And maybe if I've done a lot of good things in my life and I've complimented your shirt lots of times and you're like, well, he does it a lot, so he's a good guy. Perhaps I do a lot of good things from the Bible, so you think he's a good man. Is that what earns me the title good man? Again, let's follow that through. Let's think about Judas for a second. How many people in here, if they were asked to do Judas's eulogy in the first century, could get up, do Judas's eulogy, and say, fully believing what they were talking about, that Judas was a good man? Some of us maybe crack under the pressure and say, it's a eulogy, I better say this, but I doubt anybody would truly mean it, right? Nobody thinks that Judas was a good man. That's not how we remember him in our minds. That's not what we think about when we read the stories. We don't read the Bible and say, oh, Judas was a good man. Why? Well, let's look at what Judas did. We can consider Judas as typically bad. Let's just use that as the opposite of good. Judas is a bad man. But we look at what he did. He was an apostle. He was with Christ. He preached the gospel. He had miraculous abilities and healed people. He had a whole plethora of things that we would consider good, yet we still label Judas as bad. So again, when you answered the question I asked you, and you said, well, it's because Eric complimented my shirt a lot, that's why he's good. I don't think that still quite means that I was worthy of the title of good man. Because people can do a lot of good and still be bad. So if it's not the fact that I did one good thing, or if it's not the fact that I did a lot of good things, what makes somebody good? What's the qualifier? What do we mean when we say good man? Perhaps you might now be thinking to yourself, well, it's not just that somebody did one good thing, it's not just that somebody did a lot of good things, but maybe it's that somebody does a lot of good things and they have an absence of bad things. I think we're getting somewhere with that, but let's take another Bible character and really just follow through with that logic. Somebody who does a lot of good things but has an absence of bad things. Does that make them a good person? Let's look at Peter now. If Peter died, which he did, and we were asked to do his eulogy, I think most of us could probably give that eulogy and say, Peter was a good man. Right? If you were asked to do Peter's eulogy, you could probably get up and say he was a good man and truly mean that. Let's look at what Peter did. Peter, a good man. He denied Christ. One of the rashest apostles. Christ called him Satan. He has a whole plethora of things that we would regard as bad, right? And yet still, all of us, in our minds, if Peter walked up and asked the question, am I a good man to you? All of us would say yes. Peter was a good man despite having done bad things. So what does it mean to be good? What qualifies somebody as good? After thinking about this, I started going to different sources, and I started looking at, admittedly, this was a dumb move. I looked at what people have come up with instead of immediately going to the Bible. I was like, I'll check out some philosophical arguments for what goodness is, all right? So I'll give you 3 real quick, the mainstream philosophical arguments for what goodness is, just so that we can all appreciate how much better the Bible's going to be in a minute, all right? The first mainstream idea of what qualifies somebody as good, or what's commonly referred to in philosophical circles, which I have recently joined as of like a week and a half ago, it's the classical theory of goodness. All right, the classical theory of goodness states that merely being makes something good. If something is, then it is good. All right? So merely existing makes something good. This pew is good because it exists, because existing is better than not existing. So the pew is good, the pulpit is good, all of us are good merely because we are. All right? So that's a classical theory, and immediately we can throw it out the door because there are things that are bad that are real, right? Has anything bad ever happened to you? Was it just a figment of your imagination? Was it something that existed? If it existed, it wasn't necessarily good, right? We define things as being bad, so merely being cannot be good, right? Classical theory. Outrageous. We throw it out immediately. We have the illusory theory of goodness. This one's great. This is all about subjective truth, as we would commonly refer to it. But the illusory theory emphasizes, falsely so, that goodness is merely a social construct. That whatever the masses deem as good is therefore good. So we look at our world today, and, well, it seems like we've embraced, as a society, the illusory theory of goodness, because everybody has pitched in together and made one big old team to be the majority, and they say, well, homosexuality is good. And most of the world now agrees, well, the illusory theory states that, well, if the masses, it's just a social construct of what's good. And they've all agreed that's okay, that's fine. They've also all come together and they've said abortion is fine, it's good. And guess what? That is the widely accepted idea. Not everyone, but those who believe in a subjective truth instead of an objective standard kind of all pitch in together to decide what is good and what is not. Again, we can throw this out because everybody agrees that certain things are wrong. The most infamous and everybody's heard this because it gets brought up every 10 sermons. The Nazis, the higher power stuff. There's objective truth and an objective standard, right? So we can throw the illusory theory out. And finally, if you have 45 minutes sometime this week, and you're just like, how can I absolutely waste this time? There is something called the modern theory of goodness. And I read a 3-page long proof, and then I read the 8-page long commentary of the proof, just to get to the very end where they say, oh, by the way, this is circular reasoning, and we fully admit it. The way the modern theory works is goodness comes from someone who is good, and someone who is good produces goodness. And it's just this big old circular reasoning, all right? They're not wrong. It's not a terrible definition. And admittedly, it's probably the closest to correct. And I wouldn't necessarily say it's wrong, but does that help us understand goodness at all? No, it doesn't help us at all. So I wasted all that time, and then I decided, you know what, we're going to get off of philosophysimply.com, and we're going to start going to some dictionaries. I didn't quite get there to the Bible yet. I was thinking, I'll check out all these sources. My foolish mistake and my waste of time that I'm now sharing with you. So I went and I looked at some definitions, and I do this to maybe broaden our appreciation for how much the wiser the Bible is than the world. Yes? I looked at some definitions, and in economics, the good is defined as the capital. It's what we work towards. It's the valuable part of what we were going towards. All right? And I think there's some insight there. It's the valuable, it's the product, it's what we wanted. There's some insights in that, maybe. Maybe man isn't completely stupid, although we are mostly stupid. We then look at the field of ethics. And this one, I like this definition a bit more than the one on economics. Ethics defines good as that which conforms to the moral ideal. That which conforms to the moral ideal. Now, if we take ethics' idea of goodness and we actually start bringing it over, and finally at this point I was like, okay, maybe I should check out the Bible for my sermon. Revolutionary idea, right? And I took that idea and I came over here, and what is goodness? What qualifies somebody to be a good man? That which conforms to the moral ideal. What is the moral ideal? What is the purest form of good that we can read about? It's God, right? It's Christ. It's the life that he lived while he was on earth. So we start looking at the Bible, and we start considering how can we be good, and we start looking at Christ to see what he did. Now, here's the thing. Christ did a lot of things that we're going to fail at. All right? So as we consider how we can be good, we can never be the purest form of good without some help. All right? So if you said at the very beginning in your mind, Eric is a good man, I'm not a good man because of me, if at all. If you said that I was a good man, it would only be because I've received some outside help to become good. It's Mark 10:18, God is the only good one in reference to Christ in his life. All right? So that's what we're looking at when we look at this idea of goodness. Now, that's not very practical. We can't do much with that just as a big old vague idea. So what I want to do now is I want to head over to Romans 12. I want to head over to Romans 12. I'm going to start in verse 9, and we're going to start reading, and we're going to read through verse 19. Because we have this handy thing here where the Bible actually gives us a little list of things that are good. We can maybe look at these and say, if I want to be good, maybe I should do some good things. Hopping back to the modern philosophy or theory of goodness, they're not wrong, but it's not very helpful unless we know what good is. So we're now going to figure out what are some good things so that we can know how we can be good. We're going to go over to Romans 12. Did I say 9? I meant to say 12. Romans 12, we're going to start reading in verse 9. Let love be without hypocrisy. Abhor what is evil. Cling to what is good. At this point in our reading, we should wonder to ourselves, well, what is good? If I'm supposed to cling to it, it'd be nice to know exactly what I am to cling to. And that's the point of verses 10 through 19, is to tie together love and clinging to good, and then give us a list of things to do in order to be that. So verse 10, be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love. I come out to Forestburg and I see y'all's faces, and it's very easy to show y'all brotherly love because A, y'all are my brothers and sisters in Christ, and B, because y'all are really lovable. All right? It's easy to do. But the verse here is talking about brotherly love, which should be all brothers, right? If you are my brother, I should give you brotherly love. That's not some crazy concept, right? So when I come out to Forestburg, really easy. All right? When I go to other congregations and they are still my brothers, even if it's not easy, I still owe them brotherly love or sisterly love. So we go through and we see that, and then the second half of verse 10 is in honor, defining how we are to go about giving out brotherly love with kindly affection to one another. The second half is in honor, giving preference to one another. We are to love each other a bit more. It sounds a little weird to say sometimes, to say, love the world a little less, but when we consider the price it took to have each other, it feels intuitive to say, let's love each other a little more. But it says in honor, not to the neglect of loving the world. All right? We get on to verse 11. That's one thing that is good. That's one thing that falls under the category of love without hypocrisy. All right? That is a good thing. That's a good action. If we want to be people who are good, we must do good things. Verse 11. Not lagging in diligence, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Not to slack off on my job that Christ has given me, but rather I'm to be on fire for it. Have you ever seen a new convert? They come out of the water with that fire in their eyes. I'm not supposed to let that go. All right? Can you think of when you were baptized? Or maybe at some point in your Christian walk that was, it started you anew. And you had that fire for the work. Because you knew in that moment you were serving the Lord. You were doing a job with eternal consequences and eternal rewards. And you had that fire because you understood. I know I remember that. All right? I was baptized, and I remember thinking, if I get in a car wreck on the way home, that's fine, but I'd really like to do the work a little bit longer because it's been all of 5 minutes. And I immediately started looking through my phone, looking for names to text for Bible studies, and I had the fire in that moment. There have only been a few other times where I scrambled through my phone looking for contacts in order to find a Bible study. That fire is supposed to be consistent. But instead, it seems in my life, and I don't know y'all, but I venture to guess that at least one other person could relate, that sometimes it spikes. And that's human nature. That happens. But we need to be working in order to keep it consistent, not lagging off in the work. So a consistent and on-fire spirit, a fervent spirit for serving the Lord, that is something that is good. All right? So there are two things so far that are good. We get to verse 12. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing steadfastly in prayer. We have several more things that could be qualified as good. All right? If we're trying to list things under this, we can hop back to verse 9 and we tie together good with these things. These are good things, right? These are products that could be goodness from a good person, right? We get to verse 13. Distributing to the needs of the saints, given hospitality, putting others' needs above my own, all right? I look out and I see somebody who needs something, and I see where I'm at, and I see that I'm coasting nicely at my current level of output of goodness, all right? I see that, I'm praying, I'm studying, I'm doing this level of good, and I see somebody else's need, and I see that I need to raise the bar of my goodness output, if we want to call it that. And I do in verse 13. But then in verse 14, bless those who persecute you, bless and do not curse. I am to raise the output of my goodness for somebody else, even if they don't do it back to me. Anybody who's been in a relationship of any kind, a romantic, friendship, anything, you've thought of the phrase or the idea, at least, of a two-way road in a relationship, right? How there needs to be effort from both sides, each person giving 50-50, or what a lot of people say today is each person giving 100%, so that, there's a nice little safety net. There's this two-way road idea, right? I, as a Christian, even if the other person isn't giving 100%, am still called to increase my goodness output, if you want to call it that, for their sake, even if it's inconvenient to me. Even if the other person doesn't care about me, even if the other person curses me, even if the other person goes out of the way to hurt me, I am still called to fully help them. That's something that's good. All right? Verse 15. Rejoice with those who rejoice and weep with those who weep. Be of the same mind toward one another. Do not set your mind on high things, but associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own opinion. We need to be people who accept that we're just that. We need to be people who accept that we can fail. We need to be people who are humble, because we're not perfect. That is something that would be good. Verse 17, repay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. These are good things. Verse 19, beloved, do not avenge yourselves. That is a good thing, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. All right, so we have this list of things that we would commonly refer to as good, right? I think we can all agree that a prayer life, humility, all these things are good. And certainly what I'm about to say might sound like I'm contradicting that, but absolutely those things are all good. And if you want to be a good person, you have to do those things. All right? But is it just actions and deeds that qualify somebody to be good? Is it just actions and deeds that qualify somebody to be good? Let's say I took this list of things from Romans 12, and I boiled it down to a list of items, right? I said, we got prayer here, we got humility here, we got hospitality here, and we have this list of things, right? And I come back to our original question, do you think that I am good? And I pull myself up right here, and I look, I contrast the things, and I say, oh, I've got that, and that, I guess I'm good. That seems a little silly, right? Just turn it into a little checklist of things that says whether or not I'm good. You'd imagine if I got up here and I said, here are the 3 things that you need to do to be able to be good. And I just said, prayer, humility, hospitality. Y'all would probably be like, oh boy, we're not having him back for the next summer series. Right? If I got up here and just said these 3 things, that'd be silly. Everybody knows there's more to it than that. Anybody who's had more than 3 struggles in life knows that there are more than 3 things you have to do to be considered a good man or a good woman, right? We all agree that it's silly, but some lovely Jewish leaders back in the day didn't think that was silly at all. In fact, these wonderful scribes and Pharisees, which we've talked about in previous classes when I've been here, and I expect y'all to have perfect recollection of all that. It's only been 4 months. These wonderful scribes and Pharisees, they had made up their mind that the qualification to be a good Jew, if they were to do a eulogy for somebody, and they wanted to say good Jew, their criteria for that was made up of 2 different sets of 3. On one hand, they had the criteria of attendance. And they said, you know what, let's boil this down into 3 things real quick. If you attend the Passover, the Pentecost, and the Feast of Booths, Booths, It always sounds like I say booze, but it's booths with a TH. If you attend these 3 feasts, then you're a righteous Jew. Good job, good job. You're a good Jew. And they would say that in the eulogy. Good Jew, he attended these 3 feasts. Right? Not literally, but that's the idea. They have boiled it down to those 3 things. And on this side of Jewish living, what it meant to be a righteous Jew, they had said, well, you pray. What else should we come up with? What if you pray? What if you do charitable deeds? And what if you fast a lot? Then the scribes and Pharisees, they had said, well, that makes you a righteous Jew. Good job. You're a good Jew. They get that in the eulogy. Good Jew, because you did those 3 things. So when we get to Matthew chapter 6, it's no surprise that Jesus has to address this terrible misunderstanding of what it meant to be good. We get to Matthew chapter 6, and verses 1 through 4 is addressing how they had thought that, well, all you have to do is do charitable deeds. That's what the scribes and Pharisees had taught. So 1 through 4, Christ addresses that. In verses 5 through 14, he addresses prayer and how the people had thought that that was all they needed to do. And then in verses 16 through 18, he addresses fasting and how the scribes and Pharisees had said that, well, that's the last of the 3, and if you do these big 3, you're righteous. So in verses 1 through 4, let's go through that real quick. Take heed that you do not do your charitable deeds before men to be seen by them. Otherwise, you have no reward from your Father in heaven. Therefore, when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may have glory from men. Surely I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you do a charitable deed, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, that your charitable deed may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly. They made doing charitable deeds all about looking good. So when I come to this list of good things to do, is it just about doing the right things? Is it just about the actions that I do? Could I theoretically come into here, a sound congregation on a Sunday morning, sit down in the pew, sing all the songs? You know, we talked about doing a lot of good things and not doing bad things as maybe a definition for goodness, you know, a working definition on that. Could I come in, do all the good things, you know, sing all the songs, hit all the notes, sing all the words, do it perfectly, and could I also avoid the bad things? You know, there's no musical instrument in the building, stuff like that. Could I come in and do the good actions and avoid bad actions and still be unpleasing to God because I wasn't focused? Can I run through the motions? Can I come in and when I sing the songs and I hit all the notes perfectly? That won't happen, but in a hypothetical world. And while I'm doing that, could I be thinking, oh, I sound real good right now? Would that be pleasing to God? Is that what he wants me to be thinking about? It's not just what we do, but it's also why we do. And that's a lot of what Christ tackles in this Sermon on the Mount here. Matthew chapter 5, he's talking about what you do. He's talking about laws. Verse 21, he's talking about murder, and then he talks about anger. Do this. This is good. We see that again in verse 27, adultery and then lust. Don't do these things, and if you don't do these things, then you are doing good. So on and so forth throughout the chapter with verse 31, with divorce. We see that in verse 33. We have oaths discussed. Verse 38 and verse 43. We have all these, do this. These are good things. But then in chapter 6, Christ comes in and he says, I am concerned with what you do, but I'm also concerned with why you do what you do. So in Matthew chapter 6, comes in and he says, in verse 2, therefore when you do a charitable deed, do not sound a trumpet before you as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets. I don't want you doing the right things for the wrong reasons. I don't want you worshiping God in order to get glory from men. It makes no sense. So he says, when you do a charitable deed, go to your Father who is in the secret place. Your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. Then we get to verse 5. And when you pray, you shall not be like the hypocrites, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and on the corners of the streets, that they may be seen by men. Assuredly, I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you pray, go into your room. And when you have shut your door, pray to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. We see that the scribes and Pharisees and the Jews who wanted to be called good Jew in that day by the scribes and Pharisees, they made prayer a spectator sport. And Christ says that's not what it's about. You can pray and still be displeasing while you pray. So goodness is not just about the good action, it's also about the good reason for the good action. And we see that wrap up in verse 16 through 18 with fasting. Moreover, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance, for they disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. Surely I say to you, they have their reward. But you, when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, so that you do not appear to men to be fasting, but to your Father who is in the secret place. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you openly. What the scribes and Pharisees had done here, they had taken charitable deeds, they had taken prayer, and they had taken fasting. Three things that, admittedly, yes, are good. But they had done good things in a bad way and negated the entire, the entire point of doing a good thing. All right? They had done charitable deeds for show. They had prayed for show. Now, what's the difference between those two things and fasting? We might have talked about this in a class. It's been a lot of months if we have. So I'll say this little tidbit again. What's the difference between charitable deeds and prayer and fasting? What's the difference between these two and fasting? In charitable deeds and prayer, I'm actively doing something, right? I am choosing to donate to charity. I am choosing to pray. And if I'm actively, doing something physically, y'all can see me do that, right? You could see me donate to charity. You could see me pray. But when I'm fasting, I'm actively doing nothing, right? Y'all can't see me fast. So what the scribes and Pharisees had done in verse 16, it says, or when you fast, don't be like the hypocrites with a sad countenance. They disfigure their faces that they may appear to men to be fasting. What happened there is they had noticed that nobody gave them glory for fasting, so they had gone and, not literally this, but they had gone and put makeup on in order that everybody could see that they were fasting. In other words, if they weren't getting praise from other men, there was no point in doing it. Let's not focus so much on our reputation with men that we neglect our relationship with God. It's not just about good things, it's also about good reasons for those things, right? So we consider that, and as we move forward, we have this now general definition of what goodness is. It's doing good things. It's doing good things for the right reasons, all right? And thirdly, it's abstaining from evil things, bad things, right? So who is good? In and of themselves, without outside help. The only person who's been good is God. It's been Christ's life. Mark 10:17 through 22 is a narrative of that. Christ was good. He did good things for good reasons and abstained from bad things. I can do good things. I can do good things for the right reasons, but without outside help, my record is always going to show that I've done bad things. I, in and of myself, will never just be good if it's left up to me. I've already messed it up. Maybe when I was one, I would have had a theoretical chance that definitely never would have come to pass, but there was a theoretical chance when I was a baby. But nobody in here has maintained that theoretical chance. We've all messed it up. We all ruined it. So if we can't just be good, if I stick to myself and my own means, when I die, the person who gives my eulogy will not honestly be able to get up and say he was a good man. It won't happen. Not honestly, unless he's ignorant. Maybe I get an ignorant man and he truly believes it. But an informed man would know that I was not a good man if I stuck to my own means to become good. So who does God consider to be good? And why do I care about God and his opinion and not y'all's? If we look at Matthew 6 again, we see, let's just pick verses 1 through 4. It's repeated 3 times here, but we'll just pick this instance. Matthew 6, verses 1 through 4, we see the word reward used twice. In verse 2 at the very end, it says, "Assuredly I say to you, they have the reward." That's the kind of oh snap moment of this little instance here. It's because Christ said, if you want to go out and get glory for doing charitable deeds, enjoy the glory you get from men. Surely I say to you, you've got your reward. If we want to just get glory from men, we can. But the word there used for reward is talking about wages. It's what we got. It's what we got paid for doing work. All right? So I can go out and I can do things before y'all, get praised by y'all, and maybe in a sense I've earned that praise from you, but God's giving me nothing for it. So I better enjoy what I earned from that. I better really appreciate it while I have it, because I'm not going to have it for long. But there's a second word used for reward. The first one was misthos, and the second one is much harder to pronounce. So we have the second use of the word reward. It's a different Greek word, and it's at the very end of verse 4. It says, "Your Father who sees in secret will himself reward you openly." And this Greek word used for reward is directly tied to God and his greatness. God will, from his own ability, from his own infinite ability, reward me if I do good things for him, if I'm a good man. No offense to y'all, it's nothing personal, but in lieu of that, I couldn't care less what y'all could do for me. I don't care about the praise that y'all might be able to give me. I don't care how much of a handshake y'all give me after the lesson. I don't care. I care about the end of verse 4 where it says, God will, from his own abilities, reward me. That's what it's about. So when I consider who I want to think of me as good, that was a wordy sentence. When I choose the person that I want to be good towards, I want to be good for God, not just good for y'all. Although I certainly hope that I'm productive for y'all, but it's not my main focus. So who does God consider as good? I know why I care about it. It's because he can do something infinitely greater for me than anybody else. But who does he consider as good? Jesus was good. I want to be considered good by God. I want that. We've looked at me and we have our rough definition of goodness. Somebody who does good things and abstains from bad things. We talked about how I've already butchered this part. I already did bad things. I messed up. I cannot make myself good again. Christ can make me good again. The life of a Christian can make me good again. So when I look at myself, I can try all day long to do a bunch of good things, but the second I've done one sin, the second I've messed up once, is the moment that I will never again be able to be independently good. It's game over for that side of the game, all right? That's done. That door's closed. And it turns out, I haven't just done one thing wrong. Believe it or not, I've done a lot of things wrong, and I will continue to do a lot of things wrong. There will be many instances when I am not good. So when we look at Peter and Judas again, we see that Judas did a lot of good, but he's bad. We see that Peter did a lot of bad, but he's good. Why do we label them as such? It's because Peter turned to God and he asked God to make him good again. And Judas did something bad. And he just ended his story there. We can make mistakes. It's expected. When God told us to be like Christ, he knew that we weren't all going to hit that goal exactly as we needed to. There's a term in educational psychology, and I'll use it here because nobody wants to listen to it anywhere else, but you'll have to sit through this. There's a term called the zone of proximal development. All right? And that's when we're held to a higher standard than is capable for us. We might not think of a lot of applications, but one that most of us are probably familiar with at least is when training a child. You talk at a slightly higher level than they themselves can speak at. And that's how they learn. It's because what they're watching is slightly better than themselves. If you spoke at a level that they spoke at, or maybe a little below their level, they wouldn't learn. They would think that they were doing all right, or that perhaps they were even exceeding expectations. We set the bar a little higher than what is always possible. The bar was set at Christ. We all already failed. But that doesn't mean we give up. That means we keep giving our absolute best to at least try and get as close as we can to that bar. We push ourselves. We don't ever say we've made it. We're constantly growing in order to at least try and get close to the bar. So this evening, who does God consider to be good? It's a person who does good things, go figure, right? I think y'all probably had that one before I started speaking. It's a person who does good things for the good reasons. Perhaps y'all already had that beforehand. And it's a person who goes to God to get rid of their bad things. Again, y'all probably already had that, but maybe it's a new way of looking at it. So as we consider ourselves, and I'll do another cardinal sin of public speaking, and I'll get way too personal here. Imagine that you too had your life end this evening. And that on your eulogy on Saturday, could the person got up to give your eulogy, could they say your name and then say that you were a good person? Or in your afterlife, can God look at you and say that you were a good person? It's not about never having made mistakes. It's about repenting for them. It's not about always having known what was good. It's about learning what is good and doing what is good. So this evening, as we reflect on those things, we have time where we can come to brothers and sisters and get some of that brotherly love that we talked about. If you have any needs, you're in the best place possible. You're with the church. Come forward as we stand and sing. Art thou